Hi everybody. Hey, I want to apologize. I'm going to be a little windy today because what I want to talk about is wind deflection. How many of us have heard, gosh, it's a windy day, you'd better shoot a heavier bullet so you've got better wind resistance? Is that true or not? Well, not quite, but it's close. Here's the thing with wind blowing your bullets. It doesn't really just blow your bullets. I was taught some time ago that to think of wind deflection or wind drift on your bullet, imagine pushing a stick into a stream, a creek running by. And if you've got, say, a long skinny stick versus a short fat one, push them both the same, and the long skinny one is going to go further in the water before it gets drifted downstream by the water. Well, that's not exactly what's happening with bullets. Bullets are being not just blown by the wind, but deflected onto a new course. And because of their spin, it increases. It's really complicated stuff. But before we go there, I want to pose this question. Do you think a .22 caliber bullet would drift more or less in the wind than a .308 bullet? And what if the .308 bullet was twice as heavy as the .22 bullet, and they were both launched at the same initial muzzle velocity? Well, we can do that experiment. Here I have a 150 grain round nose bullet in .308, came off of a 30-30. And here I have a puny little 75 grain .224 bullet out of my .22 250 Ackley Improved. 75 grain, double that weight, 150 grain, drive both of them at 3,000 feet per second. Who do you think is going to drift more in the wind? Well, you're probably going to guess now I've got this one figured out, and I do. So look here on my chart. So we've got a ballistics coefficient of 0.243 on that .22 bullet, and the BC is only 0.277 on the .308 bullet. They're both starting at 3,000 feet per second. Now look at here. At 100 yards, deflection is about 3/4 of an inch in that .22 bullet, but it's an inch, almost an inch and a half in the .308. Already drifting more in that wind. Now this is a 10 mile an hour right angle crosswind. So this is the bullet, here's the wind, being drifted that way. 200 yards, you're looking at just under 3 inches for the .22, almost 6 inches for that .308. Starting to become significant. Look at 300 yards, you're just under 7 inches for the .22, 14 inches, twice as much. Let's go back to those bullets now. Here's your heavier bullet, twice as heavy. .308 versus .22, and it's blowing twice as far in the wind. That is just the opposite of what I was taught. I mean, everybody said you've got to have the bigger cartridges, the bigger bullets, the heavier calibers, heavier bullets. That's what defeats the wind. Here's the real answer. What defeats the wind is high ballistics coefficient. That means a sleek bullet like this, and a high muzzle velocity. If you have the same muzzle velocity and the same ballistics coefficient, it doesn't matter if your bullet is a .22 or a .284 or a .264 or a .308 or a .338. As long as the BC and the muzzle velocity are the same, they will deflect exactly the same in the wind. Same speed of the wind, same speed of the bullet. It's the BC that's the same. The weight is different, so the energy downrange will be different, but not the wind deflection. Pretty cool, isn't it? Huh. So, other things we can talk about on wind deflection is exactly how does it happen? That's the confusing part, and it frustrated me for years and years. If it's not just drifting in the current of the wind, why is it going so far off course? And the way that they find that it's not just being blown by the wind is a little experiment involving dropping a bullet and shooting it. If you shoot a bullet perfectly horizontally, gravity is pulling it straight down, right? And if you drop a bullet from the muzzle, it gets pulled straight down. Well, it sounds weird, but it's true. If you do that, both of those bullets will hit the ground at the same time. Sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? Well, this bullet has a speed or vector in the horizontal direction, but it's still being pulled by gravity at 32 feet per second, the same as one dropped from the muzzle. So if they both leave at exactly the same time, They should both hit the ground at the same time. It's just that this one hits right here, and this guy goes way downrange before he hits. So that is part of why your bullet deflects so much in the wind. If you have a 10-mile-an-hour wind and do that experiment, the bullet that you're dropping from right here, by the time it hits the same time the one downrange hits, let's say it's 16 feet above the surface of the ground for both of them, that's going to be exactly the same when they hit, but this one is not going to have blown nearly as far as this one will be deflected. Because it's spending the same amount of time in the air, both of them are, why isn't the wind blowing this one as far as it deflects this one? So let's go to that 300-yard thing on this. If we're deflecting 14 inches with that round nose bullet, and we do the drop and the shoot with that one at the same time, do you really think for a 16-foot drop, a 10-mile-an-hour wind is going to blow this bullet right here 14 inches? Just doesn't happen. You can experiment with it if you want, but if the one is going downrange, gets that much farther off, what is happening to it? That's the big issue. How do we figure that out? Well, you've got to be, well, you don't have to be, but it sure helps to be some kind of an engineer, a mathematician, trigonometry, calculus, and all that kind of complicated stuff. And it really is complicated, at least it is for me. And I've studied and studied this manual, but it's difficult to understand. Here's an example. This is under yaw of repose and resulting cross-range deflection. It scares me already. And here's just a small part of it. The yaw of repose is the small angle between the H vector and the V vector. This angle causes a small component of the aerodynamic force called F side to act on the side of the bullet, and which can be thought of as acting at the center of the pressure of the bullet. The side force creates a torque vector M on the bullet. The torque vector M is a vector cross product of the moment arm R, which extends from the center of the mass. I mean, are you lost yet? So that's what makes it difficult for laymen like me to understand. So I want to try to explain this in layman terms. And you engineers out there probably have to straighten me out, but this is the best I can do. I did an article on this in my blog some time ago. In fact, I've probably done 2 or 3 of them. This one got a lot of attention, and some guys told me I had some of it wrong. But I went back over it again, and I think the only thing I had wrong was the tilt of the bullet. So I'm going to try to put this up on the screen. It's a really artistic drawing, I'll have to tell you that. So, as you can see, we've got our bullet lying here on its line of departure. Straight line, straight ahead, right? The wind is coming right angle from the left. What's it going to do to that bullet? Well, we know it's going to blow the bullet to the right? But it's going to deflect it to the right. And why does it deflect it? Here's the really hard part, but I think I've got it figured out. As this bullet flies downrange, it is not perfectly stabilized, even if it's perfectly stabilized. I mean, it's got a cone here in the front, and there's a little bit of wobble on this thing right on the nose. It's called a yaw. If you're a pilot, you might understand this a little better than I do. But just imagine that bullet going like that instead of spinning perfectly on center. It's got just a smidgen of this curvature in the front, this yaw. Well, that exposes a little bit of the nose to a pressure. So you've got the pressure of the air coming against the bullet, straight line through it. That's the drag. And then you've got this little bit of side force coming on the nose, and the bullet's going to react to that. So you've got the wind coming in like this, and like a weather vane, that bullet needs to cock a little bit into the wind. But remember, it's got a heck of a wind coming this way. You're looking at 2,000 miles an hour of wind from that bullet going in really fast. Then a little bit of side wind at just 10 miles an hour. There's not going to be much of a change, but just a smidgen. And then that acts on the center of gravity and the center of pressure, which I don't quite understand, inside of the bullet. And that forces it, because it's rapidly spinning like 200,000 to 300,000 revolutions per minute. Those forces work together to make that bullet cant at an angle and start to slide over. It's the energy of that rotation that helps drive it over with that little bit of wind difference that you're getting on that force side. So I might not be exactly right on this, but it's just fun to know why this stuff happens, and I think I'm pretty close. So back to our illustration, if that bullet then has a little bit of wind from the left, the nose is going to cant a little bit to the left. And that's where I had it wrong in my blog. I had it canting to the right. So as that bullet now travels downrange, it is spinning and sliding over to the right, farther and farther as it goes downrange. And I always say it has a new angle or new vector, and that's traveling at an angle. So it starts off dead center, a little bit of wind hits it and goes, and it starts it at this new angle, and it continues at that angle. And as you can see, as you go downrange, that angle opens up. Your line of sight and the line of departure remained the same, but now the bullet is moving off on a new angle. And that's why its own energy is sending it farther and farther from the target, whereas the one that you dropped doesn't do that. That's why there's such a difference between the as far as they blow. And that's the most sense I can make out of it. But if you really want to understand this stuff, you probably have to get a degree in something. And I don't have it. But it's just nice to know that it's not the wind blowing your bullet, but deflecting it. And it can be a really big deal. As we just saw, at 400 yards, that little 22 in the 308 we're talking about, you're looking at almost 13 inches of deflection with a 75 grain bullet, but 27 with that 308. I mean, that is a lot of movement. If you're going to do any kind of shooting past 200 yards, wind deflection can be a really big deal. So you need to understand it at least enough to get your charts and tables and memorize how much deflection your bullet is getting with those winds. And then once you've done that, you've got to, of course, factor whether it's a 5-mile-an-hour wind or a 10 or a 15 or a 20. You get much higher than 20-mile-an-hour winds, and I just recommend you don't shoot at anything more than maybe 200 yards away at most. Not only is your bullet blowing a lot, but you are too. And it's hard to stay stable unless you're right on the ground or you've got a really stable position of some kind, because those gusts and stuff will just buffet you. I was pheasant hunting once in Kansas on a windy day. Well, I should say on a typical day in Kansas in November. And I was having trouble hitting birds. I just couldn't figure it out. It felt like I was right on. And so I just thought, what is going on? Am I not seeing it right? And I threw the gun up as if I were going to shoot a bird, but I just pointed it at a fence post. And just about the time I got on the post with a point like I thought I should be, the wind hit me and gusted me off, and that's when it struck me. The wind was buffeting me, and I was missing with a shotgun. Imagine what it does with a rifle. So those are the things you need to consider. That is wind deflection. Now there's something called spin drift that's also involved in this, and I need to study up a little bit more on that. It's always been explained to me as the bullet is riding on its own cushion of air as it spins. Most rifling in barrels in America is to the right twist. So the bullet spins off to the right, and they say because it's spinning that way, it creates kind of a cushion of air underneath itself, and it starts to drift off to the right. This is actual drift, not deflection. That's not quite right either. It has to do with precession and yaw and a lot of these mechanical engineering terms that I don't quite understand. But the cool thing about this, and really surprising, is that with no wind, dead calm, you shoot, and with that twist rate of the bullet, it will go down range and veer off the target 4, 5, 6 inches at 1,000 yards. The military had the 30-06 150 grain load or standard load figured out, and it was spin drifting at 1,000 yards around 5 to 6 inches. Don't remember exactly what it was, but fairly significant at that long range. Just another one of those crazy things that happens with long range, and another reason why I like to stalk closer. I have a lot more success remembering to get down low and crawl than I can remember all of this mechanical, mathematical, trigonometry stuff. But those are some of the challenges of long-range shooting when you've got wind deflection and spin drift in your bullet. So until next time, this is Ron Spomer inviting you to subscribe to this channel. Check me out on ronspomeroutdoors.com. And as usual, thanks to all of our patrons on Patreon for supporting us and making these videos possible. And if this horn has been grabbing your attention, this is one of the doll sheep I picked up on one of my Alaska hunts many years ago. I keep one on the floor so I can pick it up every once in a while and just admire the mass of those horns. Just a spectacular animal. I'll show you a few more like this over the making of these videos, but I just thought it'd be cool to have one here on the desk so I can show off a little bit and you can enjoy some big heavy horns. But man, could you imagine carrying that around all day? You get yourself quite a neck. Well, at any rate, Ron Spomer saying, hunt honest and shoot straight.